The sun was sinking behind the western hills as the two lines of opposing horsemen approached each other. The order to cease fire was passed along the line when, instinctively it seemed, 1,000 sabers were flashing in the air, recalling the words of Tennyson, who says, "Flashed all the sabers bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabering the gunners there." Hi, my name is Bill Coughlin, and host the First Person Civil War podcast. While the generals of both sides get most of the recognition, the Civil War was fought by the men in the ranks, and they told their stories during and after the war. Follow me as I reveal what these men witnessed in the battles of the Civil War. Episode 59 is entitled Private Joseph J. Sutton and the 2nd West Virginia Cavalry at the Battle of Five Forks, and relies on his book, History of the 2nd Regiment West Virginia Cavalry Volunteers During the War of the Rebellion, which he published in 1892. Records of Joseph J. Sutton's early life are scarce, but by the beginning of the Civil War, he lived around Portsmouth, Ohio. When President Lincoln made his call for 500,000 troops in July of 1861, men from across the North heeded the call, and in states like Ohio, too many men wanted to fight, specifically in the cavalry. In early August, several counties in southeast Ohio contributed enough cavalry companies to form a regiment, which eventually sent an application to muster for service as the 4th Ohio Cavalry to William Dennison, the governor of Ohio. By the time the paperwork arrived at the governor's desk, the allotted cavalry regiments that his state was required to fill was already complete, and he had no choice but to deny the request. For Joseph Sutton and the rest of his regiment, it was not welcome news. Many of us have always regretted that we were not allowed to be mustered in as the 4th Ohio Cavalry, where we properly belonged. Yet, neither during the progress of the war nor since its close have we had the slightest cause to complain of our treatment at the hands of the little mountain state. Born amid the throes of war, rocked and shaked with the roar of cannon, and whose soil drank the blood of many of her own loyal sons. West Virginia, the child of the storm. When Virginia seceded from the Union, the counties situated around the Allegheny Mountains did not desire to join the Confederacy and opted to form the restored government of Virginia, with Francis Pierpont as its governor. Pierpont had a daunting task before him. Not only was he head of a government that claimed legitimacy over all of Virginia, be they Confederate or Union-leaning, but even the citizens of the Allegheny counties had divided loyalties. The former issue could not be immediately resolved, and the latter meant that raising regiments of infantry and cavalry, as well as artillery, posed a problem for restored Virginia, but a solution to regiments outside the state. Firmly resolved to enter service as a cavalry regiment, the Ohioans petitioned Governor Pierpont to muster for service in Virginia, which was eventually approved by the Secretary of War. By September, the regiment quartered in Parkersburg, and on 8 November 1861, mustered into service as the 2nd Regiment of Loyal Virginia Cavalry, with Joseph J. Sutton as a private. Once the state of West Virginia entered the Union in 1863, the regiment reflagged to the 2nd West Virginia Cavalry. Though this regiment was at its core from Ohio, men from West Virginia eventually filled the ranks after the myriad of battles the 2nd West Virginia fought, such as Princeton Courthouse, Lewisburg, 2nd Kernstown, Fisher's Hill, Cedar Creek, and Waynesboro. In the wake of this battle, 2 March 1865, which destroyed Confederate resistance in the Shenandoah Valley, all cavalry under the command of Major General Philip Sheridan rode overland to the siege around Petersburg, which included Private Sutton and the 2nd West Virginia Cavalry, where they would participate in lifting the siege and the final campaign against the Army of Northern Virginia. By March of 1865, the siege around Petersburg entered its final days. Lieutenant General Grant now had at his disposal the Army of the Potomac, the Army of the James, and the Army of the Shenandoah to break the Confederate defensive works. While preparations were underway for the decisive breakthrough around Petersburg, the Union Cavalry rode to the western edge of the line to support the advance of the 5th Corps in that area. Private Sutton and the 2nd West Virginia Cavalry now rode in Colonel Henry Capehart's 3rd Brigade, of Brevet Major General George Armstrong Custer's 3rd Division, of Major General Wesley Merritt's Cavalry Corps, of the Army of the Shenandoah, commanded by Major General Philip Sheridan. Now situated north of Dinwiddie Courthouse, Major General Sheridan awaited the arrival of the 5th Corps and prepared for his advance upon Five Forks. Without the 5th Corps, the Confederates enjoyed a local numerical superiority and attempted to destroy Sheridan's cavalry as it awaited the arrival of the infantry. On 31 March, a combined force of infantry and cavalry under the command of Major General George Pickett advanced upon Sheridan's cavalry, which successfully pushed them back to the courthouse before night descended on the battlefield. This is considered the last offensive action of the Army of Northern Virginia, but Pickett could not exploit the gains he made that day and ordered his men back to his defensive positions around Five Forks to guard the South Side Railroad. Major General Sheridan fought most of the Battle of Dinwiddie Courthouse without Custer's division, who by the end of the day had appeared on the field and reinforced the line. By nightfall, with the 5th Corps in his vicinity, Sheridan decided to attack Pickett at the courthouse the next morning, 1 April 1865. At sunrise, Private Sutton, the 2nd West Virginia, and the rest of Custer's division advanced across the battlefield of the day before. The morning of Saturday, April 1st, opened bright and clear when we left our position and dismounted, advanced into the deep pine forest. Soon after starting, the clear resonant notes of a rebel bugle, far to our front, was borne upon the air, and we readily recognized the sound. To horse. This cavalry belonged to Major General William Henry Fitz Hugh Lee's cavalry division, who was also in command of the Cavalry Corps, and was screening the Union line before Five Forks. Our position in the vicinity of Dinwiddie Courthouse brought us in rear of the left of the infantry confronting our right of the line of battle at Burgess's Mills, and ascertaining during the night that that force, consisting of the 5th Corps, had about faced and was marching to the support of Sheridan and his discomfited cavalry, which would have brought them directly upon our left flank. At daylight on the 1st, we commenced moving back to our position at Five Forks, where Pickett placed his infantry in line of battle. With Custer's division finding no Confederates in the positions from the day before, Major General Sheridan ordered his cavalry and the 5th Corps, who he had command of, to advance toward Five Forks. Sheridan's plan of attack called for the 5th Corps to deploy on the right flank, while the cavalry held the center and left flank. Major General Pickett deployed his infantry behind rudimentary breastworks not even 2 miles to either side of its center, which was the crossroads of Five Forks. Pickett placed Fitz Hugh Lee's cavalry corps on both of his flanks, and the two then departed the defenses to attend to lunch behind the lines. This meant the overall commander was absent from the impending Union attack. The 5th Corps and the cavalry were advancing on Five Forks, but the infantry's rate of march was hampered as it traversed the densely wooded and rough terrain around the gravelly run church. Sheridan's cavalry, now dismounted, were in position by early afternoon, but had to wait for the infantry to complete their march. Private Sutton and the 2nd West Virginia, who pursued the Confederate cavalry, now formed on the left flank of the Union line. Cautiously, our skirmishers advanced, feeling for the enemy. Nearly a mile was covered in this way when the first shots were fired. This was answered by hearty cheers from our side. The enemy fell back slowly, each side increasing the number of skirmishers until there was almost a line of battle. 5,000 dismounted cavalry were in this move, and were to ingeniously drive the Confederates into their works. At approximately 4 p.m., the 5th Corps began its attack, with one division marching along the White Oak Road, and two more to the north. The exact disposition of the Confederate line was unknown to the Union when this attack began. This meant that as the 5th Corps advanced, two of its 3 divisions marched past the Confederate left flank entirely. The fighting now became general along the entire line, and Custer's cavalry rode further to the west, attempting to flank the Confederate cavalry, which included Private Sutton and the 2nd West Virginia Cavalry. It was after 5 o'clock in the evening when our horses were brought to us, and mounting, we prepared to charge the enemy's left and rear. Away off to the right, the battle raged fiercely. With the gallant Custer in the lead, we started on a wild ride for the enemy. It was getting late, and, though there was no road, only timber, brush, and logs, we kept up a trot until considerable cleared land was reached. On an elevation near a house, a rebel battery was located, and being unable to depress their guns, their shot passed over our heads, causing a good many boys to unconsciously duck their heads. Let me pause here for a moment, for Private Sutton is about to describe one of the final cavalry charges of his time in the Army, and this is the whole reason why the Ohioans were willing to fight under a West Virginia flag, rather than join the infantry. He even opened the book with these lines. About the man who fights on horseback, the romance of war has always centered. From the first chronicled battle, the horseman has been not only the most picturesque, but the most dramatic figure in warfare. Writers who have recorded history of armed conflicts have found the most thrilling climaxes in the sweep of squadrons. Tennyson's Charge of the Light Brigade will be read when the stories of greater combats have been forgotten. The 2nd West Virginia and the rest of Custer's division now faced to the east and began their advance upon the Confederate flank held by Major General Fitz Hugh Lee's cavalry. Private Sutton, harnessing his inner Tennyson, joined in the charge. The rebel cavalry skirmishers were met by our brigade and soon put to flight. About this time, we gained the top of a low ridge, a stubble field in front. Across this field, stretched away to the right and left, was the nicest line of rebel cavalry we ever beheld. Our cheers were answered by the famous rebel yell. Our carbines were brought into play as we steadily advanced, but the enemy did the same. The bugles were sounding trot, the band playing Hail Columbia, the roar of battle on the right, almost drowning the sound of our carbines. The deafening sounds of battle as the opposing cavalry advanced was that of the general engagement all along the line at Five Forks. As Brevet Major General Ayres's division met the Confederate left flank upon the White Oak Road, the other 2 divisions of the 5th Corps continued their march past the flank. After frantic communication, these 2 divisions eventually joined the attack, with Brevet Major General Griffin's division forming on Ayres's right, and Brevet Major General Crawford's division eventually marching to Ford's Road, before facing south and advancing upon the Confederate rear. As the Confederate left began to crumble, Private Sutton prepared for hand-to-hand combat at the opposite end of the battlefield. The sun was sinking behind the western hills as the two lines of opposing horsemen approached each other. The order to cease fire was passed along the line when, instinctively it seemed, 1,000 sabers were flashing in the air, recalling the words of Tennyson, who says, "Flashed all the sabers bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabering the gunners there." Though the Confederates were prepared to meet Private Sutton, the 2nd West Virginia, and the rest of their brigade in battle, both sides of cavalry halted just short of a ditch that ran parallel to them. One side would have to make the first move before they could cross sabers. During the brief time this halt was made, the opposing forces eyed each other as if preparing for the deadly hand-to-hand encounter. Lieutenant Emerson McMillan said, "Boys, this won't do! Let's go over!" When putting spurs to his horse, the ditch was cleared. And at the same time, the rest of the regiment boldly went over and fell on the rebel horsemen with saber. Owing to the position of the lines, nearly all of the casualties fell on the 2nd West Virginia, most of the loss being in wounded. In this hand-to-hand fighting, many of the enemy were killed before they retreated. As Capehart's brigade of mostly West Virginia Cavalry met Brigadier General Richard L. Beall's Virginia Cavalry Brigade, even Major General Custer recognized the intensity of the fight on his left flank. Before the enemy could shift the position of his batteries, my columns had pushed past the extreme right of his line and were moving rapidly to place themselves directly in rear of his position. Although this movement was almost entirely under the view of the enemy, it was so rapid that he was unable to prevent it. W.H.F. Lee's division of cavalry was discovered to be moving upon us. Portions of each command moved simultaneously to the attack. For some time, success was varied and uncertain. Even though Pickett returned to the line, the situation at Five Forks was untenable. Facing Union infantry and cavalry on his right, center, left, and rear, the Confederate line broke in retreat in the only direction they could, to the northwest. The next day, 2 April 1865, the Union Army attacked and broke through the defenses around Petersburg. Private Sutton and the 2nd West Virginia joined in the pursuit of the Army of Northern Virginia, which ended on 9 April at Appomattox Courthouse, where General Lee surrendered his army to Lieutenant General Grant. By July of 1865, the 2nd West Virginia were in Wheeling to complete their discharge. Private Sutton received a copy of a poem that was published in Pittsburgh that focused on the red tie that cavalrymen wore under Custer. He eventually printed copies of his own and shared it with the men before they departed for homes in West Virginia and Ohio. The Heroes of the Custer Tie, dedicated to the 3rd Division of Cavalry. The heroes of the Custer Tie, the lads who love the crimson dye, in all Columbia's glorious land, where all are brave, there's not one band, like those who wear the Custer's tie. When the fierce charge the trumpets tell, their eyes flash fire, their bosoms swell. With rifles cocked and gleaming sword, like rivers through its outbanks poured, rushed Custer's lads with deafening yell. No pause for them when bullets fly, and battle's clouds obscure the sky. Some slain, some wounded, fill the dust. The rest are maddened, onward burst, and startled foemen fall or fly. The rider's valor gives new force, in battle shock to his swift horse, like eagles swooping on their prey, or like the vivid lightning's ray, the squadron dashes on its course. The banners were by proud foes borne, the guns from field and fortress torn. Where are those flags that once waved high? Where is that dreaded artillery? They now those heroes' camps adorn. Well may they shout, well may they brag, who never lost one gun or flag, who never heard a hostile gun, but quickly surrounded, seized, and won. The peace within their lines they drag. For gallant Custer's boys a cheer, for honor, will, and daring fear. They rushed the bravest and the first, when at the foeman's ranks they burst, and spread before them flight and fear. Famed warriors of the Custer tie, the time of peace and home is nigh. Won't the dear ones you left at home, with joy and pride around you come, and clasp those with the crimson tie? Give those for rank and wealth who wear the pile of gold, the glittering star. We'll wear our badge of bravery, our brave division's crimson tie, in peace, in war, at home, afar. And should our country e'er demand for other wars your veteran band, the heroes of the Custer tie, prepared to conquer or to die, around the stars and stripes they'll stand. Thank you for listening to the 59th episode. The link to Private Sutton's book is now available on the podcast website, firstpersoncivilwarpodcast.com. On Facebook, Instagram, X, and LinkedIn this week, you will find a picture of Private Sutton in 1863. On these social media accounts, you will also find diary entries of Captain Wills of the 103rd Illinois as he marched with Sherman through the Carolinas in early 1865. In 2 weeks' time, Private John Henry Worsham of Company F, 21st Virginia, provides next episode's first-person account at the Battle of Cedar Mountain. My name is Bill Coughlin, and thank you for listening to First Person Civil War Podcast.